So I researched a little bit. I went to a lot of different tech companies here in Silicon Valley who have a lot of friends working there, not Iranian at that time. And I asked them to have a group for Iranians at your company. And they said, not yet. But we have other ethnic groups. And I was very stunned that we didn't have that at these companies and there wasn't a sense of belonging. So we started with one meetup to see how it goes. 7 women showed up, and that has turned out, fast forward, over 10,000 members, and I get goosebumps when I talk about this. 10,000 members worldwide. We're in 10 cities, including London, Paris. We're launching tomorrow. I'm flying out to Vancouver, so if you have friends there, please let them know. We're in LA, Austin, Bay Area, Boston, DC, and we're launching more cities to come in 2019. It's really important, as Yasaman mentioned, that we as a community need to pay it forward. It started just with me researching for something to see why I couldn't find something that I was looking for. And I applaud each of you who can go out there and start something that you believe needs help. So our DNA and our organization is paying it forward. So while you're here, please help someone. You all have a network. You all have access to incredible things. You're all talented individuals who are successful here in Silicon Valley. So please make a point to help someone that is here today and needs your help. Thank you so much. And obviously we're fundraising as well. For 2019, we're fundraising to add team members to grow faster. As I mentioned, in 2019, we are growing into 10 more cities. And we are also adding on 2 programs. One of our programs will be for the younger generation. We're currently talking to different universities to team up with for a 2-week boot camp in 2019. And then beyond that, we're also working on a technology aspect to connect our community worldwide as well. So thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful night, and I'll hand it over to Uma.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Subramanian, and I'm one of the 2 Persian imposters on this panel. So when Sharam, who I've known for 12 years, asked me if I wanted to host the Persian Women in Tech, my response back to him was, I'm not Persian, right? So once he clarified that he did in fact know that, he said that this would be a pretty remarkable panel. And I started to read about Pejman and Yassi and Vanessa and Sepideh, and I was like, oh my God, I really want to do this. So I am really thrilled and excited to be here tonight. We have a really exciting panel. So I'd like to start by having everyone sort of talk about, well, Pejman, I'd like you to introduce yourself first, because you've got an amazing story. And then after, tell us about what you think about on a daily basis. Like, what are the areas that you think are interesting right now? What do you think about on a daily basis?
First of all, thank you, Citi Ventures, for hosting us, and Sepideh and Persian Women in Tech, and Harvard Alumni. I'm just really honored to be here. My name is Pejman Nozad. I'm a founding managing partner of Pear Ventures, Colella. We invest in early stage tech companies. In companies like Dropbox, Living Club, DoorDash, the Garden Health, which has an Iranian founder, has just been public. Our firm invests very early at ground zero, normally at the time that there's an idea, and majority of them doesn't work, but the one it works, we hope become really, really big companies. I started the firm in 2013 with my partner, who is actually, she's from Barcelona and got her PhD at Stanford. I founded her company in 2003. We know each other for 18 years. So going back to a question that what excites me is entrepreneurs around me. No, I don't invest in any product. I don't invest in any sector. I just invest in people who are determined to build something great. People who have this burning desire to make something out of nothing, and people who have a vision to build the long-lasting companies. And if you look at our portfolio companies, it seems we don't know what we are doing, because we invest in consumer tech, to robots, to SaaS, to biotech companies. But at core, we partner with outliers. We call them warriors, who walked through the wall to make things happen, and they saw a real problem in the big market.
Go ahead, Nancy.
So Hadjibashi, I actually now live in Dallas, but I work for Citibank. Vanessa and our peers. I'm probably more nascent at Citi. I joined a year ago now, heading up data for Citi's Global Consumer Bank, which is its biggest business division with almost 180 million customers worldwide, across cards, mortgages, checking accounts. And as scary as it sounds, all their information sits in my platforms, for better or worse. But I still sleep at night. Before joining Citi, I try. Before joining Citi, I was working at 5 years and wonderful experience. I worked in London in their headquarters, and that's where I found my career transitioning into technology. My background is actually traditional finance, accounting almost, and I just wanted to do a little gig for 2 years at Barclays, get some digital skills and go to a startup. And I met Shaigon there. Shaigon Karapi that Pejman I mutually know. He's also a big figure here in Silicon Valley, and he sparked me to actually think deeper and probably pursue that career of mine. And we spent 3 years driving that bank's data transformation, innovation transformation, and across the African continent. Lived in South Africa for 3 years, and I think it really sparked a whole new level of what leadership means to me, beyond just my selfish needs of wanting to thrive in the corporate arena. And that's why I think there's much more I want to achieve still in my role right now at Citi, but also way beyond that. So very delighted to be here.
So thanks again for all being here. So just maybe brief background outside of Citi, since you know what I do at Citi, and relates maybe to what I think about every day. So I started my career as a high school teacher. I was, I was part of the Charter Corps of Teach for America. I taught in junior high and high school in East LA and Brooklyn, and then did a whole slew of other things, none of which are at all related to banking. I came to Citi almost 9 years ago, really as a result of the financial crisis and wanting to figure out, was there a way to change a big bank, and had long debates with my family before accepting the offer. Like, when I called my father and said, I've been asked to interview the company, I was an entrepreneur looking for a small company to run. He said, it's not a big company, is it? I said, well, it's kind of big. And he said, well, it's not a big bank, is it? I was on the phone with him. I said, I don't know how you know that, but it's a big bank. He said, it's not Citibank, is it? So now this is getting a little weird. But we had a long debate about, how do you balance social impact, transformation with, working at a company that at the time had the second worst reputation in the country. And what I've found is that, we live in a world, like it or not, that is essentially capitalist and is likely to stay that way for at least some period of time. And therefore, the transformation that needs to happen, I think, in financial institutions is something that I think about every day. We've been doing some work, in fact, led by Bala, who's either here or run out now, on economic vitality and how the world has become a place where, for individuals, businesses, and cities, it's really winner take phenomena. So what role can a financial institution play in changing that dynamic? And of the many things I think about every day, which delightfully my job are lots of different things, that's the one that I ask about every day. And every single day that I either see Vala and ask him how he's doing or email him is really about, how can we play a bigger, more important part in changing the world? And as I said at the beginning, when I was welcoming all of you, I think that, we are on a poor trajectory right now for the people who are principally making those decisions, being of a very singular background and singular mindset. And so I think the work that you all are doing is really critical, because we need a wide variety of voices to shape the kind of world that I want to live in, that I want my child to live in. And that's what I think about most of the time.
I already said enough. No, can we skip?
Okay, we can skip that. So I have done a bit of background research and found that all of these people are very, very interesting. And I have questions that I would have loved to ask them. So Pejman, on LinkedIn, you wrote an amazing post calling yourself Silicon Valley's most unlikely venture capitalist. And you tell the story of how you arrived in America and worked in a yogurt shop and then got promoted into a rug shop. And you sold $8 million in Persian rugs and then told your boss you needed to start a venture capital fund, which seems unlikely. And then from there, the companies that you've invested in are worth more than $20 billion. So the question I would ask you is, what advice would you have today if you were to start from scratch for recent immigrants / hustlers?
Actually, I was thinking about this question as I was driving here. Exactly 26 years ago, I came to America here. I actually didn't speak one word English, and I didn't want to come here. I played professional soccer in Iran. I played for Iran's national team under 17. I was a reporter, and by pure accident, I came here, and I had only $700 cash, and I was in love with a girl in Iran, and I thought I'm going to lose her, so I have to call her every day. And this is 1992, and it cost me like $5 per minute going to this, payphone. So that $700 was gone in a few weeks. So imagine that you're here, you don't speak the language, and you don't have money. So I bought a car for $750, 5 payments. It was a 1973 Chevy, and I knew a former Iran's national team player works in San Jose. I didn't know what kind of work he does. I called him and said, "This is Mr. Sharafi." So he said, "Yeah, come, I have a job for you." So I showed up, and I thought this is an offer. So I started to wash cars, but that's my first job in America. But I tell you, I was the best car washer the world has ever seen, and no one washed cars like me. And then I started to sell rugs. So and I think I'm the best rug salesman. I can rest assure you, I'm the best rug salesman the world has ever seen. No one has sold $8 million. That's actually 1 year old. Of Persian carpets. So the point I want to make is, it's what you do is important, but how you do it is just a lot more important. I think if you become the best car washer in the world, one day you're going to have car wash as your own business. So whatever you do, be the best at it, and some magical things happen. Look at my life. I was a rug salesman, and I'm a venture capitalist now. I don't know what kind of proof you need that things change, and I think future is always better than today. I think that the second things I want to bring it up here, that don't let anybody tell you what you can achieve and what you cannot achieve. I think don't listen to the media, Twitter or social media, that what are the limitations of your capabilities. I think the difference between us and Elon Musk is that he knows no boundaries. We do. So I think it's very important that we don't limit ourselves what we can do. And third, I think I learned this by doing it, and the act of kindness goes a long way. Sincerely help people, and it comes back to you.
Awesome. So continuing on the hustler theme, Yasi, you spent a lot of time investing in emerging markets. What is the main difference that you see between entrepreneurs, specifically in the fintech space, in places like Africa versus what you see here? And what's kind of the most revolutionary idea that you've seen coming out of these emerging markets that you think would be great in the US?
So I think the 2-3 biggest observations from my experience, some of that across a few countries in Africa, but also beyond, is that founders really pick causes that they really deeply care about. So one example, we had this company as part of our Techstars program called Asuriba, and the founder is from Ghana, very, very religious person, built a mobile company, essentially coming and saying there is a lot of rural areas, not just in Ghana, but other African countries, where people go to church, sometimes on Sundays and many times also multiple times during the week. So how can I, and he represented himself as one of those community members, find a better way to give my money to my church? So it can't just be cash-based. How can I utilize and leverage mobile technologies to essentially go so that people can pay, and as part of your salary, by the way, that's like a very national thing in Ghana, to give my money to church, and also create easier access to gospel content, all types of faith content. So it's not that these founders come in and think about the technology. I need to incubate a new technology that can patent and we'll get money out of it. But it's like, I have a real problem in my community. I care about it. My family cares about it. And how can I leverage maybe a lot of times existing technologies and create a context to go solve for that? So it's a very dear mission, and they take a much longer time horizon when they go about their startups. It's not just, oh, I'm going to do it for 3 years, try to cash out, exit, and or whatever, go into an IPO. They want to do it for a long period of time. So they care about, the bigger macro societal impact. Secondary again comes back to less focus around blockchain. And I want to go, for example, enhance blockchain technology, but how can, as a byproduct, utilize blockchain to solve for a problem that exists in my country. We see some of that also being replicated now by Western founders, so not just those being, in emerging markets. There's an Israeli company called Avenues GT, another UK company called Everledger, where they're again tackling problems that exist in communities. Avenues GT uses blockchain to come and connect buyers and sellers, remove intermediaries. It happens to be utilizing blockchain on the back of it, but it's not because they're so in love with blockchain technology. Everledger is trying to address blood diamonds. They're saying, we're going to create a central record of diamond ownership. So blockchain sounds wonderful for that, versus what I see a lot of here in more developed financial systems is people get too fussed about the technology and they're forcing to find use cases for it. And that's what I always also give as an advice to founders. Whenever people approach me, how do I go after emerging markets to expand? I say, go tackle what the problems at the base of the pyramid are. There's a reason the country is still an emerging country, and it usually comes back to problems of financial inclusion, literacy, food, safety. If you find solutions, irrespective of whether you're creating and incubating technology or utilizing existing ones to solve for those, that's where you're going to thrive.
That's awesome. Vanessa, I'm going to change the question that I have for you based on what you said earlier. You, if I could just quickly summarize, what you said. Capitalism is it's sort of currently structured, probably won't work forever. And how are you and the team at Citibank thinking about perhaps new models of capitalism, and how would you change the system if you could?
I'm wholly unqualified to answer that question. And I learned when I was teaching 8th grade that answering a question that you don't know the answer to just causes you to lose credibility, at least with like 13-year-olds for 3 or 4 weeks. So since I've just met all of you, losing credibility immediately seems like a bad idea. I will make absolutely no predictions about whether capitalism is a good long-term system or whether there should be another system. All I would say is that our observations, if you look at any of the data over the past 20 to 30 to 40 years, what you see is that there are certain folks, certain cities, certain businesses that have had outsized returns. There's a really interesting article in the Times about 10 days ago that looked at the implications of the economic changes in the states just over the past year with tax cuts, et cetera, and basically calculated that for the average middle-class family, all these changes that if you look at a macro level sound really huge, amounted to $122 a month, which is something if you're calling back home on a payphone, but probably isn't like the game-changing thing that it sounds like when you think about it in macro terms. And so, what I'm most focused on, what we spend a lot of time on, is how do you translate all these big trends into what does it mean for individuals, and how can we help individuals? And I would say the same thing is true if you think about diversity. Like, you can get really down about all of the trends, how many women get funded, how many minorities get funded, like how many women or minorities get funded, like you get to a really, really tiny place in that Venn diagram really quickly. So how do we take those macro trends and turn that into what you said at the beginning, which is how do you pay that forward and make sure that at a tangible micro level, we're continuing to make more and more progress, which is not at all an answer to your question, but I think an important thing as we think about not getting either too buoyant or too depressed about what one sees in the aggregate, and realizing that the world is just the sum total of everyone's life and experience, and that happens at a very granular, very personal level.
That's an amazing answer, actually. Sepideh, as someone who thinks daily about diversity and women in tech, how have the events of the last 18 months, specifically as you think about the Me Too movement, and the kind of both the kind of endorsement and the backlash against it, changed the way people are thinking about diversity, and do you feel that it's becoming more equitable on the back of these events?
I think it's obviously more visible now. So data that we have seen now beforehand, at least, was 17 to 30% of media coverage is about a woman. Thinking about 17 to 30% only. That means 70% of the time we see profiles of men and so forth. I think with this movement, something has changed. Now we are profiling more women. We're coming up with new solutions, whether it's at corporate level, whether it's organizations or individuals who are taking it in their own hands to start companies where they can support this particular movement and also have now responsibility around it as well. So we each have to take responsibility in regards to our actions. In regards to diversity, I think we need to think about it differently than what we have before. I know in this country we look at diversity as African American and the Latino community, but obviously there is more than that. I mean, there is the MENA region community, Iranians and so forth, and they are part of the community as well. And so as minorities, we're contributing not just locally or nationally, but also globally. So I think those movements are changing the way we look at diversity and inclusion, but also the impact it has is different because individuals are taking responsibility to do something.
Awesome, great response, and thank you for mentioning the word impact. That's a nice segue to my next question, and the topic of this panel is actually impact. And so I'd like to hear from each of you in turn. How do you define impact? What does it mean to have impact? And how have you pursued and measured impact in your career?
Actually, I'll share a story. I think about 10 years ago, I was making a very important decision in my life, but I was really afraid of taking the next step because I thought I'm going to fail. And I knew it's the right decision, but I was very worried until a day I remember I met my mentor, is a very close friend of me, and he told me, Pejman, you're an entrepreneur. This was the first time I heard somebody telling me I'm an entrepreneur. I remember I didn't sleep the whole night, and the next day I quit my job and I did what I wanted to do. So, and I made my life mission to really do the same thing for the others. So for me, I think the way I see impact through my life is just recognizing people's potential. And that's what I do every day, and I love what I'm doing because I think entrepreneurs needs to be recognized, and I built an institution to recognize their talents and really help them achieve what they want to do. But its reverse also is important. I think if all of you want to have an impact on anything, you don't need to have an organization, you don't need to be Barack Obama, or you don't need to build Bill Gates Foundation. Small things we do in life could have huge impact. Actually, I share the biggest impact somebody has in my life almost every day. There's a barista in downtown Palo Alto at Coupa Cafe. Whenever I go get a coffee, he makes coffee like this is the last coffee he makes in his life. He does it with such a love and precision and with smile. And always when I buy this coffee, I said, God help me that I do my job today the way he does this. And I mean, the impact he has on me every day, it's more than Dalai Lama by order of magnitude. So the point I'm bringing is this impact might sound really huge and big, and you think you have to have this power to be built to impact the society, but you can do small things to impact. For me, it's just recognizing people's potential and help them to get there.
So I think for me, I had to grow into this conversation. I think in my 20s, I was absolutely clueless. I think impact just meant self-impact. Things that I'm interested in and very selfish motivations. I think in my 30s now, I've quite evolved. And now I always define it into small scale individual impact, having impact just on one human being at a time. That's already a blessing. And then obviously more macro societal and social impact. And the way I always see how can I have impact, and I exercise it in my work and also outside of my work, is what do I think as an individual in society has made me successful in life? Is it a combination of hard skills, but also maybe personality attributes that I think make me stand out? How can I help others to realize those in themselves to also become successful in life, right? Because ultimately, I think the biggest success we know is helping other people's success in some shape and form, hopefully after we have our own success. And at the workplace every day, I say it's actually not about hard skills. And I know in today's education system, everyone is out there learning technical skills, equip yourself for next generation, especially with fourth industrial revolution coming on, you gotta be ready for it. But what are the soft skills that I found in myself through all the moves that I had to do, going through Iran, the war, coming to Germany, adapting to that, coming to the US? It was resilience, it was grit, it was motivation, self-strength, not waiting for someone to give me goals. And how can I teach my own teams today at Citi, yesterday at Barclays, to not always wait, at least in a corporate environment, to look up for someone to give purpose. That you need to teach yourself to find that purpose in yourself every single day. That's the only way you set yourself up for success. So that's the individual impact that's right. I think on the macro societal one comes to the hard skills part. And I just recently attended the Grace Hopper conference. For some of you who may have attended that, it's once a year in the celebration of Grace Hopper. Over 20,000 women gathered. This year was in Houston to kind of celebrate her. And I spoke about the topic of big data for social good. And I always start the same social conversation with the similar question of how many in this room, when you have time to do community service, do you go and paint walls? Most of the people do that. And then how many of you do you actually use your technical skills when you do community service? Probably like 1/5 of the room. And I'm like, that's a shame, because you have unique skills that most people out there still to this day don't have. Are you really thinking you're having the most impact with, the attributes that you have in yourself? And there's nothing wrong with going and painting walls or cleaning toilets as part of your community service, but are there not more unique ways where your strength can really have impact in whatever cause you may be interested in? And that's what I always also urge. And I did a little bit of that myself when I was in South Africa, but how can we use the power of artificial intelligence and mobile technologies to nurture soft skills? Because if people are setting themselves up for success, how can each one of us in technology field take a deep look and say, what makes me stand out? And am I using that in the missions that I care about in my community?
So I get asked this question all the time, leading innovation for a company, because most of what I do is completely unmeasurable. So it's typically asked in a are you in any impact kind of way? As though, and who knows, because it could come years from now. It's just something I think that's important about any kind of impact at a personal level, at an enterprise level, at a systems level, is that you think you know what you're looking for, but you probably have no idea, right? It comes either so much later or in forms that you can't really measure at the time. I've spent part of my life thinking about impact as very personal. I've gotten, further when I was teaching, I was like, you can only teach so many kids in a day. Like, that's not enough impact. What if you could just go do something bigger at bigger scale? So I think the way I think about it now is more, do I feel every day like I'm right on the edge of pushing too far? Am I right on the edge of speaking truth to people that they're not particularly interested in hearing? Am I right on the edge of pushing someone that I'm mentoring to, think about their success differently so that they might not call me again? Because I think that, we are in a time right now where, there's a lot of challenges, and so there's a lot of desire for a more comfortable conversation. And I think that, we all sometimes need to be nudged. So I try and not measure what the ultimate outcome is, though I think about it a lot. I think it's really hard to measure. I try and measure, have I made myself uncomfortable every day? And then I feel like that was probably okay.
I think about impact as a responsibility. And the reason that's how I think about it comes from my dad. My dad moved us from Iran to Germany and then again from Germany to the US, so started at zero, because his focus was impacting our life as his children to have a better life. And it was his responsibility. And I think because of that, and it was embedded in us that we have a responsibility to the world as well every day. Whoever we meet, what are we doing? How can we provide resources and enabling others? And so throughout my career, I always thought about if I'm touching someone's life, how am I enabling them? How am I providing them an opportunity to succeed in their life as well? And I think when I look at the measure, I don't think you can measure when you support someone else, really. You know, they go through their life, but the impact is I feel happier and I think they feel happier. I mean, in our company, we measure through, you know, growth and when our community is receiving job opportunities and so forth. But I think at the end of the day, it's a responsibility we have, and we can awaken that in every single person.
Awesome. So because I'm hosting, I get to ask fun questions. I have two more bucket list questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. My first question is another project the future question. Sorry, Vanessa. But we know that you all have remarkable vantage points. And so as you look out over the next 10 years, what do you think are the most interesting macro trends that you expect to see? And how does that drive the technology, innovation, and investment strategies that you are pursuing at the moment?
You know, if you're me and you do what I do, the more I do, the more I learn that I shouldn't have any opinion what works and what doesn't work, especially in technology. So I really don't know. That's the honest question. What's going to happen 10 years down the road? I don't know. Actually, I live every day for those moments that somebody walks to our office and surprise us. And you know, we typically would like to see the future through the eyes of entrepreneurs. I think the future is built by entrepreneurs, not by investors. I think they dream about future. We support them to get there. I remember when we started this fund in 2013, everybody was talking about IoT for 6 months, and then everybody talked about drone, and then it was blockchain, and now, I mean, they say if you sprinkle a little bit AI on your deck, everybody gives you money. So I just don't know, but I think there's going to be a major shift in technology because of artificial intelligence and machine learning. I think innovation needs to happen in healthcare and education for sure. I think biotech is growing, but if you tell me, do I know? I really don't know. And I missed some pretty amazing company because I thought I know, and I didn't believe the entrepreneurs. I believed in my own opinion, and I missed some pretty amazing opportunities. So I just learned to not having a concrete opinion of what works and what doesn't work.
So I think I almost by default have to say data. That's my rule. But I actually think so. I think we are living in an information age. It's a hot topic. It keeps coming up, probably more in negative light these days than positive light, sadly. Data being the new oil. I think in any type of industry these days, if you start with that and see how can I create the next generation of solutions, experiences, powered by not just vertical information in one domain, but maybe ecosystems of parties coming together, and I facilitate that. I think that's a very, very niche space to play with. We think about that a lot in financial services, that it goes beyond just, again, financial products, but in the eyes of the consumers who are just trying to get jobs done every day in their life, they just expect players to collaborate behind the scenes, make sure it's done safely, make sure it's done the right way with their full awareness, and make my life as easy as possible. So if you start with that mantra, and I think a little sprinkle, I like that analogy of behavioral psychology, human psychology, because I think there's a lack of a lot of, technical rebels who don't take still a very user-centric approach I think the field of psychology is going to become bigger and bigger of how we see adoption happening around these new services and solutions, and combining that again as part of their technical innovations is going to be very powerful. And I think hence the social sciences bit with the human lens is going to be very, very relevant for, especially as in the artificial intelligence space.
I think 10 years is essentially impossible to predict. At least it's impossible for me to predict. If I could predict it, I'd have a totally different job. I think, we tend to look at trends that are sort of 3, 4, 5 years out, just because I feel like, while the people focus on technology change, I actually think that behavioral change and sort of structural change in companies and industry have to go along with technology. And it's when you get all three of those things together that you start to see things move. And I feel like we can get enough of a handle on technology and behavior and industry structure to reasonably predict 2 or 3 or 4 years out. If you ask me about 10 years, I think the only thing that is predictable is that change will be still happening. So we think a lot about, how do you build, you talked about resilience before, how do you build resilience, how do you build courage, how do you build capability to move through a world that continues to change. But I'm not sure. I know that I don't have any clear crystal ball about what that will be. I just know that things will continue to evolve, and we need an involved and equipped population to be able to handle that.
I'll echo Vanessa. The only thing I would say is the way we work will be different with the technology that's coming into the market. So I think the workforce or what type of skill sets are required and how individuals will have jobs will certainly change because of AI and robotics and whatnot. So thinking about the future is also looking at what type of education we want to get, what we want our kids to learn, so that we are enabling them when they do go into the workplace, that they do have jobs to take over.
Great, okay. Pejman and the rest of the panel. So you didn't predict a trend, but then how do you decide who you invest in? Because there's a lot of entrepreneurs in this room, and I'm sure they're wondering. What are the characteristics of the people that you invest in, or the people that you recommend to be hired, or the people that you do hire, and what in your mind kind of really stands out?
So we typically, we spend a lot of time with the founders to get to know them before we invest. We like founders who, first, they're not tourists. That means they don't do these things, and if it doesn't work, they just go back to Google. So people who really want to make big companies. I think we like founders who are very close to the problem they're solving. Typically, when people have 20 ideas and narrow it down to 5 and pick 1 or 2, it's kind of a red flag for us. We like the founding team who either part of the industry they are building a product, or they have academic background, or they felt the pain, they got to build the product for it. We like the founding team to have relationship and history together. They worked at Citi Ventures together, or they do rock climbing every weekend. So those are the things that is important for us. I think in terms of the characteristics, I think we like the teams who have vision, and there's a confusion around it. People have mostly goals, not vision. So if you talk to some of the best founders, what they have thought 10 years ago is the same thing today. We like actually founding team who are kind of paranoid in a healthy way. So they wake up every morning, they're confident that where the company is going, but they question themselves every day, their decisions. I think we like the teams who are capable to attract talents, and especially those teams that they believe their company and their employees is above themselves. So if these are check marked, then we want to make sure if things doesn't work today, it's okay with us, but we want to imagine if it works, it becomes really, really big. And that's our job the first 2-3 years, help those founding teams.
So I don't invest in companies in my role anymore, but we select companies to work with, startups, mid-sized, more established corporations as well. And actually, more because they have a great visualization solution, they have a great analytics solution that we care about or labeled as AI. We definitely want to meet the entire founding team typically, and we want to see, what's the long-term vision? Are they in it for a short game or the long game? We're a big bank, so we are heavily regulated. We possibly cannot, partner up with entrepreneurs that tomorrow may not be around anymore because they're in love with the next best idea. So it's very important to us how they think about pricing the product, one party versus another. Is there consistency in how they're maintaining relationships with their other clients? In Citi, typically in the sort of business units, we are not the first ones who sign, big contracts right away, multi-million-dollar ones with those who are still at seed stage, to embed it into our tech landscape and take it out to millions of customers just because of our historical background. And they come across as they're in it for the bigger game, then definitely that's what we care about.
So you already have a really good list of characteristics. The one thing I would add, and I don't think I'd subtract anything, the one thing I would add is that I personally like founders who are this great combination of wildly optimistic, like there's absolutely nothing they won't go through, and pragmatic and willing to listen. And there are not a lot of people who can hold both of those emotions in their brain at the same time, because they really are more emotions than they are sort of intellectual constructs about, being just, willing to, disbelieve anyone who tells you that it's not going to work, but listen to why and go figure out how to change and to pivot and to incorporate. So I like people who can hold both of those at the same time.
I don't invest in companies, but I've been through the founder route and I understand what it takes. And I get this question a lot. How do you find your co-founders? How do you work or bring people, especially at that small stage and having just a couple people? And I'll tell you one story. Radine is somewhere here. I don't know where she is. And she says hello. So Radine is part of our team. She has been around for 2 years. You've been hanging out. She came and I met her at a conference I was speaking, and I thought she would go and talk to all these incredible people that I was moderating. She was like, I want to talk to you and I want to know how I can be involved. The passion that she had for this mission, first of all, was the first thing that drew me to her, but then the resilience she had to support, come up with the ideas. And so when you find someone to work with or hire, I think you should think about what they're going to contribute, but that they can also contribute more than what you can. So you have certain skill sets and don't look in that for the next person you want to bring in. I would say somebody who's your soundboard, someone when you're questioning things can also think through it as well. So that would be my suggestion.
Awesome. Thank you very much to the panel. Now we'll take audience questions.
Hi, my name is Shubra, and I'm a physician and I invest in healthcare startups. I think the one recurring theme that I heard from almost every panelist was this desire to help others. And you made a beautiful comment that one of the most beautiful things you can do is